The massive crystal conference room buzzed with alien voices. Representatives from dozens of worlds sat around the glowing table, their strange forms casting weird shadows on the walls. Admiral HFY of the Catherian Empire stood at the head of the table, his forearms moving as he spoke. "The Void Swarm has taken another system," he announced. His voice was deep and rough. "The Helios colony is gone. 3 billion souls consumed." Silence filled the room. The Void Swarm was death itself. Wherever it went, planets died, ships died. Everything became part of the dark mass that moved through space like a hungry beast. Commander Vithra of the Hive Queens clicked her mandibles. "My people have prepared 30,000 bioships. They wait for your orders." "The Ethereals offer 500 crystal dreadnoughts," added Speaker Lumos, his transparent form glowing softly. HFY nodded. "Good. With our combined forces, we have over 100,000 vessels. We must stop the swarm before it reaches the core worlds." A soft beep came from the communication panel. The aide, a small gray being with large eyes, looked nervous. "Admiral, we have received another transmission." "From which world?" "From Earth, sir." "The humans." Several aliens in the room made sounds that might have been laughter. The humans were new to the galaxy. They had only sent out radio signals 40 years ago. Most species thought they were still primitive. "What do they want?" HFY asked. The aide's voice was quiet. "They want to join our defense force, sir. They say they will send help." "How many ships?" "One, sir." The room exploded with noise. Alien voices mixed together in what sounded like laughter and disbelief. Commander Vithra's clicking grew louder. Even the usually calm ethereals seemed amused. HFY raised one of his hands for silence. "One ship? Are they joking?" "No, sir. They seem very serious. They say their ship will be enough." More laughter filled the room. Captain Mordek of the Titanium Fleet slammed his metal fist on the table. "My people are sending 15,000 warships. These humans think one vessel can help?" "They must not understand the threat," said Speaker Lumos. "Perhaps they think this is a small conflict." HFY studied the message on his screen. The humans had sent detailed information about their ship. It was called the Indomitable. The data showed it was only 800 meters long. Most alien warships were at least a kilometer. Some were much larger. "Look at their weapon systems," Commander Vithra said, reading over his shoulder. "Primitive kinetic weapons. Chemical explosives. They still use metal projectiles." "And their crew," added Captain Mordek. "Only 3,000 beings. My smallest ship carries 10,000 warriors." HFY continued reading. The humans had sent a message along with the technical data. He read it out loud. "To the Galactic Confederation, we, the people of Earth, understand the threat posed by the Void Swarm. We wish to contribute to the defense of civilized space. Our ship may seem small, but we believe it will be sufficient. We ask only for coordinates where we can be most useful." Captain Sarah Chen, commanding officer of the Earth vessel Indomitable. "Sufficient?" Captain Mordek's metal face showed what might have been a smile. "One small ship will be sufficient against a force that has destroyed 17 star systems?" "They do not understand," said Commander Vithra. "They have never faced the swarm. They think this is like their small planetary wars." HFY thought for a moment. The humans were new, but they had asked to help. It would be cruel to refuse them completely, and maybe seeing a real battle would teach them respect for the galaxy's true powers. "We will accept their offer," he decided. The room fell quiet. Several aliens looked surprised. "Sir?" the aide asked. "One ship will not hurt our formation, and perhaps the humans will learn something about real warfare. Assign them to the outer perimeter. Keep them away from the main battle lines." "But Admiral," protested Captain Mordek, "if they panic and run, it could create problems." "One ship cannot create significant problems," HFY replied. "And if they flee, it will prove that humans are not ready for galactic conflict. Either way, we learned something useful." The meeting continued with real military planning. The aliens discussed formations, supply lines, and battle tactics. They had fought the Void Swarm before and knew its terrible power. Ships that got too close were consumed. Their materials used to make the swarm stronger. Crews were absorbed, their knowledge taken. The only way to fight the swarm was with overwhelming force and careful distance. Hit it hard, then retreat before it could adapt. Repeat until it was weakened enough for a final assault. It was slow, careful work that required massive numbers of ships. After the meeting, HFY remained in the conference room with his senior staff. They discussed the human message privately. Why do you think they believe one ship is enough? Asked his aide. HFY looked at the human data again. Their ship design was strange. Where most alien vessels were smooth and curved, the human ship was angular and aggressive. It looked like it was built for one purpose: fighting. Perhaps they have some secret weapon, suggested another officer. More likely they are simply ignorant, HFY replied. They have never seen what the swarm can do. They think their small wars prepare them for this. 3 days later, the Indomitable arrived at the staging area. HFY watched it approach on his screens. Compared to the alien fleet, it looked tiny. The Catherian ships were huge, dark vessels bristling with weapons. The Hive Queen bioships were organic, shifting masses that pulsed with life. The ethereal crystal ships caught starlight and threw it back in rainbow patterns. The human ship was none of these things. It was gray metal with hard angles. It moved differently, too. Where alien ships flowed through space like they belonged there, the human vessel moved like a predator. It reminded HFY of something, but he could not think what. Captain Chen sent a formal greeting. Her message was polite but confident. She thanked the Confederation for allowing Earth to participate. She promised that her ship would not disappoint. HFY assigned the humans to Grid 7, far from the expected battle area. If the swarm broke through the main lines, it would take hours to reach the humans. They would have plenty of time to escape. Monitor their communications, he told his aide. I want to know how they react when they see the swarm. As the fleet prepared for battle, HFY found himself curious about the humans. What kind of species sent one ship to fight a galactic threat? Were they brave or simply foolish? He supposed he would find out soon enough. The Void Swarm was 3 days away. Soon, the humans would see what real warfare looked like. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the alien fleet through the main screen. She had seen pictures, but being here was different. The ships were massive, beautiful in their own way, but built by minds that thought differently than humans. Look at that formation, said Commander Torres, her second in command. Perfect lines. Everything in its place, Chen nodded. The alien fleet was arranged like a textbook diagram. Heavy ships in the center, medium ships on the flanks, light ships scouting ahead. It was logical. It was also predictable. They fight like they think, she said quietly. Ma'am, each species has its own way. Look at the Catherian ships. Big, powerful, designed to overwhelm. The Hive Queen vessels move like insects, all coordination and instinct. The ethereals keep their distance using long-range weapons. Lieutenant Jackson at the weapons station turned around. And us, Captain? Chen smiled. We fight like humans. 3 days passed in preparation. The alien commanders held briefings that the humans were not invited to attend. Chen received orders to maintain position in Grid 7 and avoid unnecessary risks. The message was clear: stay out of the way. Chen used the time to study their allies. She watched how they moved, how they communicated, how they thought about warfare. Each species had patterns, strengths and weaknesses. The Catherians relied on brute force. Their ships were powerful but slow to change tactics. The Hive Queens coordinated perfectly, but could not act independently if separated from the group. The ethereals were precise but avoided close combat at all costs. Captain, called Sensor Officer Kim, I'm detecting the swarm 3 light hours out and closing. Chen felt her crew tense around her. They had all seen the reports. Whole civilizations had died fighting this thing, but they had also trained for this moment their entire lives. Red alert. All hands to battle stations. The bridge lights dimmed to red. Throughout the ship, 3,000 humans prepared for combat. They had drilled for this. They knew their jobs. On the main screen, Chen watched the alien fleet begin to move. The formation was beautiful and terrifying. Over 100,000 ships moving as one. The space around them flickered with energy shields and weapon charges. Then they saw the swarm. It came out of hyperspace like a nightmare-given form. The mass was huge, covering cubic kilometers of space. It was not one thing, but millions of things. Dark shapes that moved and flowed together. Ships that had been consumed and rebuilt. Technology from dozens of dead races twisted into new forms. Chen heard someone on her bridge whisper a prayer. She did not blame them. All ships engage the enemy, came Admiral HFY's voice over the communication system. The alien fleet opened fire. The space between them and the swarm lit up with energy beams, plasma bolts, and exotic weapons. The light was beautiful and terrible. The swarm absorbed the damage and kept coming. As it got closer, Chen could see individual shapes, Ships that had once belonged to the galaxy's races now changed into something else. They moved with purpose but also with hunger. The aliens fired again. This time some swarm units were destroyed, but others began to change. Their hulls shifted, becoming resistant to the weapons hitting them. The Void Swarm's greatest ability was adaptation. Hit it with energy and it became resistant to energy. Use kinetic weapons and it hardened against physical impact. They're adapting already, Torres said. Just like the report said. The alien fleet followed standard doctrine. They fired in coordinated waves using the same weapon types their species had always used. When the swarm adapted to Catherian plasma cannons, the Catherians switched to their backup plasma cannons. When it adapted to Hive Queen bioacids, they used stronger bioacids. Chen watched ships begin to fall. The swarm reached the first alien line and began to consume vessels. She could see the dark tendrils reaching out, grabbing ships and pulling them into the mass. In minutes, those ships would become part of the swarm. "Captain," Kim called out. "Admiral HFY is ordering all outer units to maintain position." "Understood." Chen watched the battle develop. The aliens were following their plan. Hold the line. Inflict damage, retreat when the swarm adapted too much. Repeat the process until the enemy was weakened. It was a good plan. It was also failing. "Captain, we're receiving distress calls from the 17th Catherian Battle Group," Communications Officer Lee reported. "They're being overrun." Chen studied the tactical display. The swarm had punched through the alien line in 3 places. Ships were scattering, trying to regroup. The perfect formation was breaking apart. "They're not adapting fast enough," Torres said. "The swarm is learning faster than they can change tactics." Chen made her decision. "Helmsman, set course for the main battle. Maximum speed." "Ma'am, our orders are to maintain position. Our orders are to help defend the galaxy. Plot the course." The Indomitable turned and accelerated toward the fighting. As they got closer, Chen could see the chaos. Alien ships firing the same weapons over and over while the swarm grew more resistant. Ships dying because their commanders could not think fast enough. "Tactical, what's our weapon status?" "All systems ready, Captain." Kinetic railguns, plasma array, missile tubes, electromagnetic pulse weapons, chemical explosive charges, laser batteries, and particle beam projectors. "Full loads on all systems," Chen smiled. Where alien ships specialized in 1 or 2 weapon types, the Indomitable carried everything humans had ever used to kill each other. They had learned long ago that adaptation required options. "Take us into the thick of it. Target the swarm cluster attacking the Catherian group." "Ma'am, shouldn't we coordinate with the alien fleet?" "No time for committee meetings, Torres. We fight like humans." The Indomitable dove into the battle. Chen watched her crew work with practiced efficiency. Each person knew their job. Each system had been tested in combat against other humans for centuries. "Firing railguns," Jackson announced. Solid metal projectiles tore through space at incredible speed. They smashed into swarm units, punching holes through adapted armor. The swarm began to shift, hardening against kinetic impact. Switch to plasma array. Energy beams lanced out, burning through swarm tissue. The creatures began to adapt again, but Chen was already moving to the next weapon. Missiles away. Chemical explosives detonated against swarm hulls. The creatures tried to adapt to explosive force, but Chen switched again. EMP pulse, full power. Electromagnetic energy fried swarm electronics. They began to adapt, and Chen switched again, and again, and again. The Indomitable tore through the swarm cluster like a knife through flesh. Every time the enemy began to adapt to one weapon, the humans switched to another. The swarm could not keep up with the changes. "Captain," Kim called out, excitement in her voice, "the Catherian ships are breaking free." Chen watched the tactical display. The alien ships, no longer under pressure, were regrouping. She opened a channel to Admiral HFY. "Admiral, this is Captain Chen. The 17th Battle Group is clear. Suggest your ships switch weapon types every 30 seconds. Don't give the swarm time to adapt." There was a long pause. Then HFY's voice came back, filled with surprise. "How did you—" "Understood, Captain Chen. All ships follow the human vessel's example." Chen turned to Torres. "Now they're learning. Let's show them what else humans can do." Admiral HFY stared at his tactical display in disbelief. The small human ship was doing something impossible. It was not just fighting the Void Swarm, it was winning. "Sir," his aide said nervously, "Captain Chen is requesting permission to come aboard for a tactical briefing." HFY watched the Indomitable slice through another swarm cluster. The human ship moved like nothing he had ever seen. It did not follow standard formations or predictable patterns. It struck where the enemy was weak, retreated when threatened, and always seemed to know what to do next. "Grant permission," he said finally. "I need to understand how they do this." 2 hours later, Captain Chen materialized on the Catherian flagship's transport pad. She was smaller than Zexhai had expected. Humans were a young species, barely out of their home system, yet this woman carried herself like a veteran of 1,000 battles. "Admiral," she said, saluting in what he assumed was human military fashion. "Captain Chen." Zexhai studied her carefully. "Your ship's performance has been unexpected. My staff tells me you destroyed more swarm units in one engagement than most of our battle groups manage in a full day." Chen nodded. "We had advantages, Admiral. The swarm was focused on your ships. They didn't expect our attack pattern." "Attack pattern? You seem to be firing randomly." "Not randomly, sir, systematically. We switched weapon types every 20 to 30 seconds. The swarm never had time to fully adapt to any single system." Zexhai's forearms moved restlessly. This was basic tactical thinking, yet none of his people had considered it. "Why didn't we think of this?" "Because you each fight the way your species has always fought," Chen replied. "The Catherians use overwhelming plasma bombardment. The Hive Queens use coordinated bioweapons. The Ethereals prefer precise energy projection. Each method works well against normal enemies, but not against the swarm. The swarm adapts to consistency. It expects enemies to have preferred weapon types and tactics. What it doesn't expect is constant change." Chen moved to the tactical display. With Zexhai's permission, she began highlighting different sections of the battle. "Your species think about war differently than humans do," she said. "You see it as an extension of your natural abilities. Catherians are strong, so you build strong ships with powerful weapons. Hive Queens work together so you coordinate perfectly. Ethereals are precise so you use exact, careful attacks. And humans?" Chen was quiet for a moment. "Humans have been at war with each other for our entire history. We've fought in every possible way, under every possible condition. We learned that survival depends on adaptation." She pointed to the human ship on the display. "The Indomitable carries weapon systems from every major Earth military tradition. Railguns from the American naval doctrine, plasma weapons developed by the European Federation, bioweapons created by the Pacific Alliance, energy shields based on Russian research, tactics that combine Chinese strategic thinking, Israeli battlefield innovation, and African guerrilla warfare principles." Zexhai felt something cold in his stomach. "Your entire species has been preparing for war?" "Not preparing for war, Admiral. Learning from war. Every conflict taught us something new. Every enemy showed us a different way to fight. We didn't get stronger by specializing. We got stronger by adapting." Chen activated a holographic display showing human military history. Zexhai watched centuries of conflict compressed into minutes. Humans fighting with sticks and stones, then metal weapons, then chemical explosives, then energy systems. Each war was different. Each required new solutions. Most species develop spaceflight through cooperation, Chen continued. You work together, pool resources, reach for the stars as one people. Humans reached space while still fighting each other. We brought our weapons with us. That sounds violent, it was. But it also made us very good at solving military problems. The Void Swarm is just another enemy to us. Different from what we've faced before, but not fundamentally different. Zexhai studied the human captain. She spoke about warfare like a scientist discussing research. Calm, analytical, but with deep understanding. Show me, he said. How would humans fight this battle? Chen manipulated the display, showing the current swarm position and the Allied fleet formation. First, we'd break up your perfect formation. The swarm has learned to expect it. We'd create chaos that looks random but follows a hidden pattern. She began moving ship icons around the display. Mix the species. Put Catherian firepower with Hive Queen coordination. Add ethereal precision to the combination. Make strike forces that combine different abilities. But our species don't work well together in small units. That's where we come in. Humans are good at understanding different perspectives. We've had to be. We'd coordinate the mixed groups, translate between different ways of thinking. Chen continued her explanation, showing how human strategic thinking could multiply the effectiveness of the alien fleet. She talked about psychological warfare, deception tactics, and adaptive strategies that Zexhai had never considered. The swarm learns from each encounter, she said. So we make sure each encounter teaches it the wrong lessons. We feed it false patterns, make it adapt to threats that don't exist, keep it constantly off balance. This is how one ship can be enough, HFY realized. You're not just adding firepower, you're changing how we all fight. Exactly. The galaxy has plenty of firepower. What it needs is better tactical thinking. HFY looked at the tactical display again. His perfect formations suddenly seemed crude and predictable. His standard strategies looked like things the swarm could easily counter. Captain Chen, I have a proposal. Sir, I want to reorganize the fleet according to your recommendations. Mixed species units, adaptive tactics, unpredictable patterns. Will you coordinate the new formation? Chen straightened. Admiral, my ship is honored to serve, but I need your commanders to trust human tactical judgment even when it seems strange. After what I've seen today, Captain, I think my commanders will listen. HFY sent orders throughout the fleet. The response was immediate and loud. Alien captains protested the changes. They didn't want to work with other species. They didn't trust human tactics. They wanted to fight the way they always had. Sir, Chen said quietly, change is hard, even when survival depends on it. Then we'll show them it works. Pick a target, show the fleet what human tactics can accomplish. Chen studied the display. The swarm had formed a defensive cluster around a captured alien supply depot. It was well protected, surrounded by adapted defenses. That depot. If we can retake it using mixed tactics, the fleet will understand. Very well. Choose your ships and commanders. Chen began selecting vessels from different species. She asked for volunteers rather than giving orders. To HFY's surprise, several captains stepped forward. They had watched the indomitable fight and wanted to learn. We'll need 2 hours to brief the crews, Chen said. Human tactics require understanding, not just obedience. As the planning session began, HFY realized something profound was happening. The humans weren't just fighting the void swarm. They were changing the galaxy's entire approach to warfare. One ship had indeed been enough, but not for the reasons anyone had expected. Captain Chen stood before a mixed group of alien commanders in the Indomitable's briefing room. She had never imagined this moment when Earth first detected the galactic civilizations. Now, beings from 5 different species sat around her table, waiting to learn human warfare. Commander Vithra clicked her mandibles nervously. Captain Chen, my bioships have never operated with Catherian vessels. Our fighting styles are completely different. That's exactly why this will work, Chen replied. The swarm has learned to expect species to fight separately. It adapts to each style individually, but when we combine them, it doesn't know what to expect. Captain Mordek of the Titanium Fleet crossed his metal arms. My warriors are trained for direct assault. We do not understand this deception. You don't need to understand deception to be part of it, Chen said. She activated the holographic display showing the supply depot battle plan. Your ships will do what they do best, attack directly, but you'll attack where the swarm doesn't expect, while it's distracted by other threats. She pointed to different sections of the plan. Commander Vithra, your bioships will create the first distraction. The swarm will adapt to biological weapons. Captain Mordek, while it's adapting, your ships will hit from the opposite side. By the time it adapts to your weapons, Speaker Lumos will attack with crystal technology. The ethereal's form shimmered. And the human ship? We'll coordinate timing and watch for opportunities. Human warfare is about seeing the whole battle, not just your part of it. Lieutenant Jackson pulled up detailed tactical data. Each species has advantages the others don't. Hive Queen ships can regenerate damage and adapt their weapons in real time. Catherian ships have the heaviest armor and strongest shields. Titanium fleet vessels are fastest and most maneuverable. Ethereal ships have the longest range and most precise targeting. The swarm knows how to fight each advantage separately. Chen continued. It's never faced them all at once, working together. Commander Korvac of the Crystal Hive spoke for the first time. His insectoid features were hard to read, but his tone seemed interested. You speak of coordination. How do different species coordinate in battle? Chen smiled. The same way humans coordinate different military branches. Clear communication, defined roles and flexibility when the plan changes. She showed them human battle footage from Earth's history. Tank units working with air support and infantry. Naval vessels coordinating with land-based artillery. Different specialties supporting each other. Your species have been fighting the swarm for years, she said. You know its capabilities better than we do. We're not here to replace your knowledge. We're here to help you use it more effectively. The briefing continued for 2 hours. Chen explained human concepts that had no equivalent in alien military thinking. The idea of rapid role switching. where a unit could change from offense to defense to support based on battlefield conditions. The concept of deliberate confusion, where you made the enemy think you were doing one thing while actually doing another. Most importantly, she taught them about tactical flexibility. "No plan survives contact with the enemy," she said, quoting an old human military saying. "So we plan to change plans." When the briefing ended, the alien commanders returned to their ships to prepare their crews. Chen remained on the bridge with her senior staff. "Think it'll work?" Torres asked. "The tactics will work," Chen replied. "The question is whether they can adapt to working together fast enough." 6 hours later, the mixed fleet approached the captured supply depot. The swarm had surrounded it with a defensive formation that looked impenetrable. Dozens of adapted ships formed concentric rings around the station. Energy fields and biobarriers created overlapping protection. "All units, this is indomitable," Chen broadcast. "Remember, timing is everything. Do not engage until your assigned moment." The battle began with Commander Vithra's bioships. They approached from the galactic north, their organic hulls pulsing with contained energy. The swarm detected them immediately and began adapting its defenses. Chen watched the swarm's adaptation pattern on her screens. Bio-resistant armor began forming on the defending ships. Acid-neutralizing compounds appeared in their hull structures. The swarm was preparing for biological warfare. "Phase 1 complete," she announced. "Catherian units, begin your approach." Captain Mordek's heavy ships came from the opposite direction. Their massive plasma cannons began charging for bombardment. The swarm, still adapting to bioweapons, suddenly had to deal with a completely different threat. "Look at that," Jackson said with excitement. "The swarm's trying to adapt to both threats at once. It's slowing down the adaptation process." The swarm's defensive ships began shifting their configurations. Some developed bioresistance while others prepared for plasma bombardment, but they couldn't do both effectively at the same time. "Ethereal units, you're clear for long-range engagement." Speaker Lumos's crystal ships opened fire from maximum range. Their precise energy beams struck exactly where the swarm's defenses were weakest, the gaps between bioadaptation and plasma adaptation. The defensive formation began to crack. The swarm tried to adapt to 3 different attack types simultaneously, but its systems were overloaded. "Now we spring the real trap," Chen muttered. "All units execute tactical switch." The human-coordinated plan shifted into its second phase. The bioships suddenly changed targets, attacking areas the swarm had adapted for plasma weapons. The Catherian ships switched to kinetic bombardment instead of plasma. The ethereal ships began using biofrequency disruptors. The swarm's adaptations became liabilities. Hull armor designed to stop plasma couldn't handle kinetic impact. Bioresistance was useless against crystal energy. The defensive formation collapsed in minutes. "Titanium fleet, clear the path," Chen ordered. Commander Korvac's fast ships raced through the gap, their superior speed carrying them past the confused swarm defenders. They reached the supply depot and began evacuation procedures, but the swarm was learning. Chen could see it on her sensors. The defensive pattern was changing, becoming more flexible. The swarm was adapting not just to weapons but to the concept of tactical switching. "It's figuring us out," Torres warned. "Expected," Chen replied. "All units implement chaos protocol." This was the most complex part of the human strategy. Instead of organized tactical switches, each ship began changing weapons and targets seemingly at random. But it wasn't random. It followed a pattern only the human-coordinated fleet knew. The swarm's adaptation systems couldn't keep up with apparent chaos. Every time it began to identify a pattern, the pattern changed. Ships that seemed to be retreating suddenly attacked. Units that appeared to be supporting switched to assault roles. The coordination looked like confusion to outside observers, but it was actually the most sophisticated tactical planning any of the species had ever attempted. "Supply depot is secure," reported Commander Korvac. "Evacuation complete." "All units withdraw in formation Gamma 7, Chen ordered. The mixed fleet retreated in what looked like a panic, but was actually a carefully planned extraction. Each species covered the other's weaknesses. Fast ships screened slower vessels. Long-range units provided covering fire. Heavy ships absorbed swarm pursuit. When they reached safe distance, Admiral Zexhi's voice came over the communication system. "Outstanding work, all units." That was the most successful engagement against the swarm in 2 years. Chen allowed herself a small smile. The alien commanders were beginning to understand. Working together, they were stronger than the sum of their parts. But she also knew the swarm was learning from this battle. Next time, it would be ready for mixed tactics and tactical switching. The galaxy's forces would need to evolve again. "Captain," Torres said quietly, "they're starting to fight like humans." "No," Chen corrected. "They're starting to fight like the galaxy, using every advantage, every difference, every strength they have. That's what humans learned from our history. Unity doesn't mean uniformity." The battle was won, but Chen knew it was just the beginning. The real war was teaching the galaxy to think like humans while staying true to themselves. The emergency session of the Galactic Confederation filled the crystal chamber with tension. Representatives from every world spoke at once, their voices creating a chaos of different languages and concerns. The Void Swarm had changed its tactics, and the galaxy was afraid. Admiral Zexai called for order. His forearms gestured sharply until the room fell silent. "The swarm has adapted to our new tactics faster than predicted. 3 more systems have fallen in the past week." Commander Vithra's mandibles clicked rapidly. The mixed unit strategy worked for a month. Then the swarm began countering our coordination. It learned to predict our tactical switches. "My warriors report that the swarm now adapts to multiple weapon types simultaneously," added Captain Mordek. "Our advantage is gone." Captain Chen sat quietly at the far end of the table. The alien representatives had begun to look at her differently over the past weeks. No longer was she the primitive human with one small ship. Now she was the tactical advisor who had changed galactic warfare. But even human innovations had limits. "Captain Chen," Zexai said formally, "your analysis?" Chen stood and activated the main display. The holographic star map showed the current situation. Red zones marked swarm-controlled space, which had grown significantly in recent days. "The swarm is learning faster than we can adapt," she said simply. "Each successful tactic we use gets countered within a few engagements. We're in a technological arms race with an enemy that improves exponentially." "Then we have lost," said Speaker Lomos, his crystalline form dimming. "Not necessarily." Chen manipulated the display, showing long-range sensor data. "The swarm's rapid adaptation requires massive computational resources. Intelligence suggests it has a central processing core that coordinates all adaptation across its entire network." The room buzzed with interest. This was new information. "Where?" demanded Zexai. Chen highlighted a stellar phenomenon deep in swarm-controlled space. "Here, inside the Nexus Nebula. The radiation interferes with our sensors, but energy emissions suggest massive computational activity." "A trap," said Commander Vithra immediately. "The swarm would defend such a location with everything it has." "Agreed," Chen replied. "Any direct assault would face the full power of the swarm's adapted defenses. It would be suicide for a conventional fleet." The chamber fell silent. Several representatives began preparing to leave, assuming the discussion was over. "However," Chen continued, "there is one possibility." All eyes turned back to her. Chen felt the weight of billions of lives hanging on her next words. The swarm's greatest strength is also its weakness. It adapts to everything it encounters, building defenses against every threat. But adaptation requires prediction. If we could present it with something it has never seen before, something it cannot predict. "What do you propose?" Zexai asked. Chen took a deep breath. "A single ship mission. One vessel, crewed by volunteers, carrying a weapon the swarm has never encountered. Strike the core before it can adapt." "Impossible," protested Captain Mordek. "One ship could never penetrate the Nexus defenses." "One conventional ship? No," Chen agreed. "But the Indomitable isn't conventional anymore." She activated a new display showing her ship's recent modifications. Over the past month, while coordinating fleet tactics, her crew had been busy. They had integrated technology from every allied species into their vessel. Catherian shield generators for defense, Hive Queen bioadaptive armor that can heal battle damage, ethereal crystal focusing arrays for weapon accuracy, titanium fleet speed enhancers for maneuverability, and new weapons designed specifically to counter swarm adaptation patterns. The alien representative studied the technical data. The Indomitable had become something unique, a fusion of every species' best technology, coordinated by human tactical thinking. "Even with these improvements," Commander Vithra said, "one ship cannot fight the entire swarm." "It won't have to," Chen replied. "The mission isn't to fight the swarm. It's to avoid fighting until we reach the core." She showed them the infiltration plan. The modified Indomitable would use stealth technology to slip through the outer defenses. When detected, it would use speed and maneuverability to avoid engagement. The goal was to reach the core before the swarm could mount an organized defense. And the weapon? Asked Speaker Lomos Chen's expression grew serious. Something the swarm cannot adapt to because it contradicts the nature of adaptation itself. A quantum disruptor that randomizes matter at the subatomic level. There's no defense against true randomness. The room erupted in discussion. Some representatives called the plan brilliant. Others called it insane. A few suggested it was both. Admiral Zexhai raised his hands for silence. Captain Chen, this mission would be suicide. Even if you reach the core, even if your weapon works, the explosion would destroy your ship. Yes, sir, Chen replied calmly. But it would also cripple the swarm's central coordination. Without adaptation guidance, the individual units would become vulnerable to conventional attack. You're proposing to sacrifice yourself and your crew. I'm proposing to end this war. The debate continued for hours. Military representatives argued about tactical feasibility. Politicians discussed the ethics of suicide missions. Scientists questioned whether the quantum disruptor would work as designed. Through it all, Chen waited patiently. She had already made her decision. The only question was whether the Confederation would support it. Finally, Zexhai called for a vote. The result was narrow but decisive. The mission was approved. 3 days later, the Indomitable hung in space at the edge of swarm territory. The ship looked different now, covered with technology from across the galaxy. But at its heart, it was still the aggressive, angular vessel that had arrived months earlier. Chen stood on her bridge looking at her crew. Over the past months, they had trained with alien specialists, learned new technologies, and proven that humans could adapt to anything. Now they would prove it one final time. All hands, this is the captain, she announced over the ship's communication system. You all know our mission. You all volunteered for this. Some of you have families waiting at home. Others are here because you believe the galaxy is worth saving. All of you are here because you understand what humans do when the universe says something is impossible. She paused, looking at the faces around her. These people had followed her into battles that should have killed them. They had trusted her judgment when alien commanders called her strategies insane. They had never failed her. We've shown the galaxy how to fight like humans, she continued. Now we show them how to die like humans. Not in despair, but in defiance. Not in fear, but in hope. The swarm thinks it has learned to counter everything we can do. Today we teach it that humans always have one more trick. The ship began moving toward the Nexus Nebula. Behind them, the Allied fleet prepared for the largest battle in galactic history. When the swarm's coordination failed, they would strike with everything they had. Helm, take us in, Chen ordered. Aye, Captain. Course set for the Nexus core. As the Indomitable disappeared into the swirling radiation of the nebula, Chen thought about the question that had started everything. Why was one human vessel enough? Because sometimes one ship carrying the right people with the right idea at the right moment could change the course of history. Because humans had learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was acting despite fear. Because the galaxy had asked what one ship could do, and humans had answered, everything that needs to be done. The final battle was beginning, and Captain Sarah Chen was exactly where she belonged, between the darkness and the light, holding the line one last time. In the depths of the Nexus Nebula, the Void Swarm waited. It had adapted to everything the galaxy could throw at it. But it had never faced something that humans had known for millennia. That sometimes, the best defense against an unstoppable force is an immovable object willing to stand in its way. The Indomitable raced toward its destiny, carrying the hopes of 1 trillion souls and the indomitable spirit of humanity into the heart of darkness itself.